What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 422 of the Established Run NBA podcast. I'm Mike Gallagher here with Drew Dinkmeyer to talk the big game last night, biggest game of the year with the Celtics beating the Cavaliers. And hey, we're talking Sixers again, because what else will we talk about here with the news that Tyrese Maxey confronted Joel Embiid? Sixers, man, just what a story. With me to do so again, Drew Dinkmeyer. Dink, how's it going?
It's going better than the Philadelphia 76ers locker room. That's how it's going, Mike. It was great to see Boston and Cleveland play what had somewhat playoff-y vibes. I mean, it was a little bit more free-flowing than a lot of playoff games, but a game this early in the season where the Cavs were undefeated and Boston is playing to their level, and an NBA Cup, Emirates Cup game is always fun to have stakes early in the season. So thankful for that and excited to talk through it.
Yep. Yeah. If you missed it, I'm sure you didn't. The Celtics get a squeaker, 3-point win, thanks to a sneaky little Ty Jerome 2 at the end of the game. I think there were some 4.5s out there, so that was a tilt fest for those who bet that game. But yeah, the story of the game for the Cavs for me was how hurt they were. I think that matters, and I think that's kind of where I want to start, because I think the big question is the Celtics beating the Cavs, like that was expected, I think. But the fact that they played them so tight, and we'll talk about why, but to have Max Strus out for the season, to have Okoro out, to have Dean Wade out, to have Karis LeVert out, they were down to like option 5 to go their starting lineup. So I thought that, considering that, when you need the wing defense and the wing help, if I'm a Cavs fan, I'm coming away pretty encouraged overall, considering Darius Garland had a poor game. We'll talk about that as well. But I guess the big question for me is, like I said, I was bought in. Like, I had Celtics their own tier, Cavs their own tier. Do you feel like you're more with me now that the Cavs are kind of like that? You should feel pretty good about them being number 2.
I still want to see these levels of performances in the playoffs. They've had such a discrepancy between the regular season and their playoff performance in the last couple of years that does concern me just from that vantage point. But I thought this was a highly encouraging performance in a lot of regards. You mentioned them being shorthanded. You mentioned Darius Garland shooting 3 for 21. There was also a wide gap in three-point efficiency in this game. Boston shot 53%, 54% from three, making 22 threes. The Cavs shot just 34.5% from three, making just 10 threes. And there wasn't a free throw disparity in the game. And there wasn't a huge rebounding disparity in the game. So to overcome all of that without having the advantage of creating like a ton more possessions by being able to be efficient on 2-pointers and kind of protect the rim on the other side is really encouraging to me from Cleveland's perspective. They did the one thing that they really worked in their favor is they only turned the ball over 7 times in this game compared to 13 for Boston. So they won the turnover battle in a big way. But I think generally if we think about like in general, if Boston shoots 52% from three, it's just really hard to envision other teams being able to keep pace with them without dominating the boards and controlling like a ton of extra possessions or shooting the lights out from three. And the Cavs didn't really do either of those things, and they were in this game at the end. And without all the role players you mentioned, and with Darius Garland having as bad of a performance from Darius Garland as we've probably seen in the last few years, 3 for 21 is just wildly inefficient. So I think all of that points to a lot of optimism for the Cavs, who a lot of people might say, hey, it's just Dean Wade, it's just Isaac Okoro, it's just Max Strus. These aren't their big players. The Celtics are without Kristaps Porzingis. That's a big player for them, and that is 100% true. Kristaps Porzingis will change the equation on this front for the Celtics as well and make them even more potent, probably make them a lot more efficient at defending those 2-pointers that Cleveland was very efficient at in this game. But Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade are exactly the pieces you need when you're playing the Boston Celtics because of the potent scoring from the wings from Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So I thought this was largely a reason to be very optimistic. I think we're at the point where the Cavs, from my vantage point, there's really not much more that they could do in the regular season to make me feel confident that they are definitely in that tier. I think they've checked all of those boxes. For me, the thing that's holding me back is just like, hey, like I'd love to see this level of performance maintained in the playoffs. The only player that we've seen maintain his level of performance from the regular season to the playoffs on this roster has been Donovan Mitchell. And so until we see it from Evan Mobley, until we see it from Darius Garland and from Jared Allen, I just have some question marks when we get to those stages. Donovan, no question marks. That dude's game is translated in the playoffs. At Utah, in Cleveland, he's been phenomenal. He was great again last night in the fourth quarter, kind of bringing them back for one final push. So I don't mean it as a way to be harsh on the Cavs that I don't have them quite there in that tier. I just think I'd like to see it in the highest stakes environments before I elevate them to a Boston team that has been in those stakes environments for the last 6 years and finally climbed the mountaintop to get to a championship level team last year.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the 3-point shooting because you see the 54% from three. They shot 67% on their unguarded catch and shoot stuff, which their volume was down by a little bit. Their catch and shoot overall volume was down. Their unguarded catch and shoot volume was down a little bit. Their dribble jumpers, 3-pointers were up. So they funneled them the right way. Kenny Atkinson talked about that. But like when you see 22 threes, the fact that the 22 threes, you think this is, oh God, blowout, but they weathered the storm about as well as they could, and Boston just made shots. They're going to do that. They've got the height. The Cavs don't have the size to contest. That was a big part of it for sure. But yeah, Kenny Atkinson said they basically executed the game plan and the Celtics made too many shots for them. And then the other thing that struck me too was on the other side, a lot of like twos, like the Celtics looked pretty comfortable for a bit, letting Donovan just cook Nemias Keita. I know you mentioned it in our Slack. They were just like letting them switch Keita. Okay, hey, take this 2-point jumper, take this 2-point layup. We're going to get a 3 on the other side, and we'll add to the score that way. So it was very much a math game, which is why the Celtics are who they are and why they win the championship and why they're doing it again, why their offense is so good, yada, yada. So the math game helped them a lot. But yeah, like I think that the Cavs did about as well as they could for the game plan that they had, considering the lack of just being able to stop the ball a little bit overall. But I should mention Garland's a little bit banged up. We'll see if we're recording this before we get the injury report. Has a back injury. Sounds like he's going to be fine, but could see those guys sit out. Anybody that you wanted to call out? You kind of nailed, like Mobley was really good. Jared Allen had an impact, and then also the guy who was kind of low key interesting was George Niang. Picked up a lot of late minutes again, and again Atkinson said after the game, we're trailing. We've got to get threes for twos. So he felt the pressure just so many times. I listened to Atkinson talk, and like sure a lot of coaches don't reveal that, but he just makes so much sense for like his logic for his moves, and I really appreciate that as someone who listens to all the pressers. But anybody on that you wanted to shout out from the Cavs who you maybe learned a little bit about last night, who like I think Mobley's just looks so good, but we kind of knew that.
And I think that's been the best case ceiling outcome for the Cavs is like when we talked about them drafting Evan Mobley, I thought that this guy was the closest thing we had seen to Tim Duncan since Tim Duncan came into the league. Now, nobody's Tim Duncan. Mobley's not going to have the offensive game that Tim Duncan had, but just in terms of like positional lockdown defense that impacts the game in ways that go beyond the box score, that's who Evan Mobley is. And I think he continues to do that this season. He's taken a step forward with the offense in terms of the aggressiveness that's really helped him both on the rebounding side and then also on the playmaking side. He's been much more comfortable. He had 6 assists in this game. Just much more comfortable offensively in playing with aggression and playing, I guess the difference between sort of like playing on your heels and playing kind of on your toes in terms of just his approach offensively has seemed more of like, I know what I'm doing, I know where I'm going, and I'm going to get there, as opposed to like, let me see where I can fit in was the approach the first couple of years. And so I think that's been a really positive sign. I should say that while we're giving kind of all these glowing reviews of the Cavs and the things that they're missing out on and different things like that, they did have a bench unit yesterday that George Niang shot 5 for 8, Ty Jerome shot 4 for 5, and Craig Porter Jr. shot 6 for 8, including 3 for 3 from 3. So from a offensive perspective, very unlikely that Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade or Karis LeVert would have replicated that level of efficiency and that level of performance. But they probably would have been better equipped to defend the Celtics in a way. So it's a give and take. The bench unit was really good. I think Ty Jerome has been fantastic. Ty Jerome is a player that I've liked a lot in the league, but sort of like floated around the back end of rosters. But whenever he's played, he shot the ball well from 3. He's been a relatively low turnover guy, and he scored at a decently efficient clip, kind of like in a poor man's Tyus Jones kind of way. And this year he's been really, really good in taking kind of the second unit when Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland need a break and leading it from a usage perspective. And in this game, the usage was not there, only 5 shot attempts in the 28 minutes, but he was very effective in his 28 minutes, and he defended really well in a way that
Mhm.
I think that was the thing that was holding him back from playing more on previous rosters. Like he was on Golden State before and different things. I think the defense was just like not quite there. It was pretty good in this game, all things considered, for his talent level on that end of the floor. And so I thought I think one of the things that's been compelling about this start to the Cavs season is that this is a team that 2 years ago we were like, man, I don't know if they have enough depth. Then they go out and they get Max Strus. They keep Karis LeVert. They kind of keep everything together and they build on that depth. They keep Isaac Okoro. They get Dean Wade back. They find a way to turn Dean Wade into like a pretty like high end big wing defender. They get enough shooting from Isaac Okoro to make him a role player possible. And now we got Ty Jerome here, who is now like the backup point guard that they remember the Ricky Rubio stretch in the playoffs
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
so bad. That was like the whole reason they couldn't get past the Knicks and that they were getting bullied is these minutes without Garland and Mitchell or without two of them on the floor were just disastrous. Well, Ty Jerome looks like he's steadying the ship early in the season in a way that they hadn't gotten that performance before. So I wanted to give some love to Ty Jerome, who I thought played really well, also for a lot of bettors. Made them either gloriously happy if they were on the over 8.5 Ty Jerome points, or miserable if they were on the -5 or -4.5 on the Celtics with that buzzer beater in garbage time. But there is no garbage time in the Emirates NBA Cup.
Yeah.
But
No.
I wanted to give a little shout out to Ty Jerome because I thought he's been great all season long, and we got a bigger stage and a bigger performance, and he continued to shine. And Craig Porter Jr. was exceptional this game for a guy who I
Mhm.
do not feel the same as Ty Jerome. Like I feel like his decision making and ball handling like are a little suspect, and he's a little bit
Mhm.
shot hunty and happy on that range. He was in control. He played very in control. He knocked down his threes, and maybe that's Kenny Atkinson and the effective coaching. Craig Porter Jr. hasn't played a lot this year, but when he's gotten opportunities in the past, he's been a little out of control in terms of shot hunting. I
Mhm.
thought he was very in control in this game.
Yeah, just one point on Ty Jerome. Every time I look up synergy stats or pick and roll handler stuff, he's first by a lot. He's shooting 74 effective field goal percentage as a pick and roll handler on 48 possessions. Obviously leads the league. But yeah, he's been great. Craig Porter played well. Talked about Niang. Let's go to Garland really quick. So 321. How much was him just having a bad game, and how much was that Boston? Like seeing Drew, seeing Derek White, even seeing like Al Horford on switches and contesting the perimeter stuff. I thought he did pretty well. Well, how much credit do you give Boston for Garland just airballing in such a big way in the biggest regular season game of his life?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, Boston is a very, very difficult defensive team if you are trying to like a lot of Darius's effectiveness is through his ability to play angles and especially like turning corners. He's really good at turning corners and getting to the rim. Boston doesn't give you those corners to really turn around. So you have to be a little bit quicker than as opposed to faster. Like you have to be a little bit more lateral agility to create space to get to your jumper. That's Donovan stuff. That's not really Darius's game. So I think it's not a particularly great matchup for him. I think it's certainly impacted by having to see a lot more Drew Holiday, Derek White, Al Horford in that spot. They certainly didn't give him the opportunities to kind of attack Nemes Kieta in the same way that they gave Donovan Mitchell those opportunities. I don't know if Darius would have converted on them in the same way because I think Darius to me is like he needs a head of steam. And this is where I thought like last year he just looked a little bit slow and it really hurt his finishing numbers. But I feel like he needs a head of steam to turn corners and that's how he finishes. Whereas Donovan is like Euro step footwork, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of unusual angles with like offhand reverse layups and different things like that. He's more creative around the rim. I think Darius is more like kind of pure speed, and I think Boston just takes
Mm-hmm.
away a lot of that stuff. So I think they're a tough matchup for him that will only get tougher when Kristaps Porzingis is healthy.
Yeah, while you were talking, made me think of like a hitter who's really good in baseball and like they can't hit the curveball. Like,
Yeah,
most of the time you're to get a lot of fastballs,
yeah,
but that guy's got a nasty curveball and they're just gonna get out. So, but yeah, but I mean, Garland will be fine. There was a lot of talk about him just being really worn down.
yeah.
Quote from Kenny Atkinson saying, Garland won't say it, but I will, that he's feeling a little bit worn down. So, yeah. I did want to just some Celtics players to shout out. I thought Al Horford was really good.
He's been
A
great
couple
for
of
the
huge
last week.
blocks in this game. Yeah, he's been awesome. So shout out to him. And it's crazy looking at these 3-pointers lines. Everyone who took more than more threes, all of them shot over 50% except Jaylen Brown went 2 for 7. So yeah, just absolutely just flame throwing offense. We didn't really learn anything. We talked about them banking minutes and playing guys more. That happened for 4 guys with 38 Tatum, 32 Horford, Derek White 42. He was so good, and then Jaylen Brown played 37. But Drew Holiday didn't. As
Sad.
Peyton Pritchard's, yeah, yeah. So
Sad for me, flag planting Drew Holiday on the DFS show,
uh,
thinking that we would get the minutes bump, and he was the one guy who
yeah,
didn't get the minutes bump. I think that speaks to a couple things. One, a pretty strong commitment from the Celtics to like just try to keep things relatively in check for him during the course of the year. Even Horford, I mean, Horford got to 32. That's, I think that's the top end range here. Drew is at 28. He's going to have games that he gets to 32, 33, 34, but I think they're cognizant of kind of managing throughout the course of the season. I thought Drew played well in the minutes that he was on the floor. But yeah, Horford was fantastic. I love Al Horford, man.
yeah.
I get like little kind of goosebumps when you just mention him playing so well still at this age, because I think of that Florida back-to-back national title team with Joakim Noah and Al Horford that brought so many of my close friends growing up in Florida that were Florida Gators fans like immense joy, and how much I enjoyed watching those two players throughout both their collegiate and professional careers, because I just think they play basketball the right way, like in every way. And Al is still doing it at this age, making a huge impact. He was the team leader in plus minus last night at plus 18, grabbed 7 boards, hit 4 or 5 threes, had 3 blocks, defended the rim really, really effectively. He was just exceptional. And the dude has been there in big games for the Celtics time after time. He shows up. He's just a big game player. So yeah, Al Horford was fantastic last night. I thought Horford was great. I thought Tatum was great. I continue to want Tatum to try to get to the line more, but he's shooting the ball so well from 3 that it's like we're having this discussion with like a lot of guys around the league right now, with Anthony Edwards, with Victor Wembanyama, with Jason Tatum, that these guys are shooting the ball so well from 3 in some cases that it's like, okay, I get it, but I'd like to see some of these runs curtailed by just like putting your head down, getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line, trying to cut momentum. We're still seeing like a little bit of inconsistency with that on Tatum's front, but that's like really judging him very nitpicky. I thought he was great. I thought Derek White continues to play at a really, really high level. Thought the bench unit struggled a little bit more. Pritchard was fine, but obviously defensively, Keta is just like, he's a guy that's going to get picked on and pick and roll stuff in a big way. They've been struggling this year a lot against centers compared to years past, in part because the time that Horford's off the floor has been a giant question mark for them defensively at that position right now. That obviously all shores up when Kristaps Porzingis is available.
Yeah, and just should note, man, the Cavs defense has slipped. Their offense has really, really carried them. So it wasn't really surprised that the Celtics kind of had it clicking.
Yep.
Just the Cavs didn't have enough there. One last point that I was thinking about, I'm kind of throwing it at you here cold. So Kristaps Porzingis, he's been practicing. They sent him down to the main Red Claws. Peyton Pritchard's the 6th man of the year favorite. Does Kristaps' arrival eventually like cut into Pritchard's minutes? Does it kind of cut into his role a little bit as they kind of stagger first unit guys? Like his role could kind of shrink as they integrate Kristaps, or is Kristaps not going to play enough? Are the other guys going to sit too much? Like that's kind of where we're at, because I think Boston's kind of coasting here. They're going to be comfortable with whatever seed they get. So like, do you come away with Kristaps getting closer and these guys winning so many big games? Like how do you feel about Peyton Pritchard 6 man? He's the favorite by a lot.
Yeah.
But
I don't think it's impactful. I think what we saw towards the end, the last month of last season, right, was like the Celtics just like alternating rest days for like everybody on the team. And I think that's just going to continue to be the approach kind of throughout the season. I think it's also going to be a slow build for Porzingis. I would imagine we start and we see Porzingis like 18 to 20 minutes a night for the first like 3-4 games, and then like bumped up to like 24 to 25 for like another 3-4 games, then bumped up to like 26 to 28 for another 3-4 games. And I don't think we're getting like the 32s until maybe at the very end, when they're like just like, hey, we got to get him cardio wise like up to speed for. But I think they're going to take it slow with him, would be my guess. And there's still enough minutes to go around. We've seen the minutes on Jalen and Jason, especially in the competitive games, be a little bit elevated. They can drop those like back down to like 34, 35 instead of this 37 to 38. Derek White can come down a little bit. So yeah, is Pritchard going to lose some of these games where he's run up into the 30s? I think that will I think he'll lose those, but I think the role will still be pretty consistent in the low 20s for him. The guys that are definitely going to be losing playing time are this Kada, Cornette, Tillman group that has like played more than they should early in the season because of the absence of Kristaps. But yeah, I don't think Pritchard. I don't think his opportunity set will be severely impacted going forward. That does not mean I think he should like for sure be the favorite to be sixth man of the year. Like just differentiating those two perspectives.
For sure. So I guess to transition from big men missing time, we could talk about Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. The big report from Shams Charania after. Should note Nick Nurse was an hour late for the presser after this game that kind of led to this big team meeting. And then obviously Shams Charania reports that Embiid is late, quote, for everything and how it impacts the locker room. And there's a note saying that Tyrese loves a big fella, but this is an elephant in the room. Obviously, Embiid's been terrible. We could talk about how bad their offense is, which we've already done. They're like 86 offensive rating with Embiid on the court. It's worse than the NBA. They've been a disaster. So there's a lot going on here. There was also a note from The Athletic from Tyrese here. He said, quote, I wanted to speak up. I felt the need to because I wanted to share that we are better than what we've shown on the floor. And then Nurse talked about how they're in a bad spot, all this stuff. So there's a lot here, man. You could talk about Embiid's legacy. You could talk about how bad he's looked. You could talk about, maybe he doesn't care as much anymore. You could I don't know. There's a lot to go there. So I'll just hand it to you. What were your first reactions when you read this report about Maxey and Embiid?
Yeah, my first reactions were, and I don't know how you feel about this. We don't know these players individually. We have never personally interacted with almost every player in the league. We've never had personal interactions with. So all we're doing is reading the tea leaves on how they interact, how teammates talk about them, how reporters interact with them. And there's a lot of different nuances to evaluating those perspectives. But I've had the perspective for the last 3 or 4 years that and I've called this into question before in the past, especially when comparing Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid, because there was a period of time that we were obsessed with comparing these two players because of the MVP chasing, that Joel Embiid's leadership was leaving a lot to be desired. And the way he talked about teammates in post-game press conferences, the way he kind of skirted accountability, the way that, it just was very different when compared specifically to Nikola Jokic, who I think Nikola is top of the pyramid at this in terms of leadership, teammate. Everybody talks about how hard Nikola works, how much he keeps the standard for everybody, how he keeps everybody in check, how positive he is for everybody. Any conversation, any interview that he talks about, earlier in the season, he's asked about, if he, what game does he think he had a bad game? And he pointed out this game that he had 41 and 11. And he's like, yeah, but defensively I wasn't good and we lost. And then he had a question about if teammates were letting him down. He's like, no, we're all a team. All of the questions, all the answers are exactly what you'd want to hear. So from the outside, it all looks like the perfect teammate. And so we were comparing Joel to him, which was not super fair because that's I think the highest bar to clear. But Joel, the difference was stark in a lot of those conversations. Maxey, on the flip side, every comment, every quote, everything I've ever seen from Tyrese Maxey has led me to believe that this is an A+ human being, A+ character, A+ human being, wants to work super hard, wants to play through everything, wants to be held to a high standard, wants to get better. Was, a guy making, did he end up winning Most Improved Player of the Year? Yeah, he ended up winning Most Improved Player of the Year, right? A guy who works super, super hard on every facet. And so my perspective when this came out was that's not surprising to me. That was my first perspective, was that's not surprising to me, because that's my perspective on these two individuals, is one guy would be getting frustrated at the other guy not living up to this this responsibility that he has as the best player on the team. So that all jived for me. The second thought I had was, this stuff comes out when things aren't going well. It doesn't come out when things are going fine. In Philadelphia, for most of the last 4 or 5 regular seasons, have been at the top of the Eastern Conference standings. Things have been really going well. when have these like issues come up? They've come up after the playoffs. They've come up when there's been finger pointing from coach to player, player to coach, player to other player. There's been like all these things. And so whenever things have gotten hard, we've seen some of this finger pointing within this organization before. And so it's not surprising that this is a really hard start to the season. They've performed as one of, if not the worst team in the league to start the season. And Tyrese is probably feeling particularly helpless because he's been hurt the last few games.
Mm-hmm.
And so the timing of all this sort of makes sense to me. Which is like Tyrese is like, I can't go out and change the outcomes by being on the court. And I can't go out there by leading in practice because I'm unable to practice. Mm-hmm. And so how can I make an impact? How can I make a difference? I need to try to help Joel understand the importance that he has in these areas as a leader to the team. And so the timing of this all makes sense to me. The context of it all makes sense to me. The question about Embiid's legacy and different things like that, I don't think this stuff will be remembered. I just don't. It's not the way that we remember players. We remember players by their performance on the floor, their statistics, and those different things. So I don't think it really impacts things that way. But I do wonder, this is his age 30 season. He didn't look particularly right in the Olympics. He's come back from missing the first 10 games of the season, whatever it was, this year. He's looked a shell of himself so far. Granted, it will take time to kind of work your way back into rhythm and whatnot, but I mean, it's all bad right now. Like, he's getting to the free throw line a lot less. He's shooting terribly, 15% from 3, 41% from 2. He doesn't look like he's playing with the same power and putting the same fear in opponents. He looks like he's very reliant on sort of like these little fadeaway jumpers, and it's not the same like powerful Embiid that's really getting to the free throw line, forcing you to like protect the rim and all these things. And so it's only 3 games. It's a really small sample. But I wonder if a player who his body has been such a challenge to him during the course of his season, if the decline is going to come faster as we get into the 30s, just because physically he's had so many challenges. And really small sample. I don't want to draw too many conclusions from it, but he has not looked like the same dominant player. And if he's not the same dominant player, then what is the forecast of this team if you're trying to run everything through a guy who's not as dominant as he used to be? And so like those are all these like challenges for this season. And like we've said before here, the 76ers have the benefit of being in the Eastern Conference, where you can get on a run. You win like 5 games in a row in the East and you're going from like 10th to like 4th, because there's not going to be a lot of separation outside of Cleveland and Boston and New York and Orlando probably. So maybe 5th, I should say. After that, there's not going to be a lot of separation. So you can make a run and get right back into it. Milwaukee's won a few games here and they're like right back in the play-in conversation. So they can do that, but there's certainly a lot of concern of like, hey, do we need to see results? Because there's eggshells on the floor now for everybody to walk around in terms of like how are things going in the locker room. And I will also say that like this is an area that Nick Nurse, I don't know how good he's been at this stuff. You look back at like you look back at the Toronto teams and there were some of these similar issues. And so I don't know if the right combination of personalities is all kind of in the right mix right now, but this is a tough path to try to dig themselves out of. And if they can, they will be better for it in a big way. I'm glad to see that Tyrese is addressing stuff. I don't know if it needs to be public, but it is what it is. But yeah, none of this news was surprising to me when it was reported. And I guess that's my big takeaway, is that like none of it's surprising. It all makes sense in the context of everything that's happening.
A few things. It's not surprising that Tyrese Maxey said that to Embiid, which I want to get into, but like the fact that it got out, this is obviously like a very tight-knit group. So someone like wanted this to get out, right? Like Shams Charania doesn't get that report unless it's, and they basically said it was true. Yeah. Like Tyrese Maxey said it was true. You don't get that a lot, so this is pretty clear that someone on the team, in the front office, whatever, wanted this out to the public to give Joel Embiid an extra little kick on top of Maxey giving one, right? So there's that. And then the Maxey stuff, like he's not an A+ person, like A+, like there aren't many players you want more on your team than Tyrese Maxey. As a young up and coming player, not only the minutes he's played. Go back to when Doc Rivers was there. Doc Rivers had to like lock him out of the facility because he was like practicing too
Yeah.
hard. Like the guy plays so hard. He's such a good teammate. And I don't know, it's pretty crazy that it's him, but like it's Embiid. Who else is it going to be, right? It's not going to be old Kyle Lowry. It's not going to be Kelly Oubre. It's not going to be Caleb Martin who just got there. It's not going to be Paul George who just got it there. It's not going to be Nick Nurse, I
Yeah.
guess. So it had to be him, right? So there's that, and then with the Embiid, you could kind of excuse. And then one other thing too, like we're seeing what LeBron's doing, and we're seeing him night in night out, about to turn 40, and still just turns it on like that. And Embiid is 30, but like his injuries make him look so much older, and the fact that he's not like giving the extra effort with practice. I don't know if he takes care of his body, but I doubt he takes care of it to the degree LeBron does, spending millions of dollars taking care of himself. So they're like considering that, like the slow start, sure, and then he went against Bam. Orlando's offense has been awesome. First game back against the Knicks, sure, you could excuse that away. So I don't know, but it's really bad. I've got concerns about the offense. Like you said, he's got to get it going here. Like we could talk about Paul George playing poorly. The fact that Jared McCain being so good is like so far down on like the headlines for this team really just goes to show how bad they are. But time will tell. I think this was kind of broke right for them. They got to get a win here in Memphis tonight. We'll see if Memphis sits guys out. But it's just peaks the Sixers, man. We can't shake them. We always talk about it like every episode now.
Yeah, trying not to, right? But it's we're here. We're doing it again because of the drama that follows them. But yeah, Paul George shooting just 29% from three to start the year. You can talk about maybe both players needing some time to get into rhythm after missing time in preseason and the start of the season. So maybe that'll just kind of take form over time. I hope so, because I think the best version of Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid is really compelling as a top line team. But if Joel Embiid is not like the challenge with the way, how do I put this? The challenge with the way that team has been built and with their offense, the way that it's supposed to be built, right? Which is everything through Embiid. And then when Embiid's off the floor, Tyrese and Paul George can like kind of take their turns. In the meantime, while everything's through Embiid, it's like you guys be the spot up shooters. That works when the player is super dominant and everyone agrees that's how this is the best way to work. When people start to question that this is the best way to work or not, you might get into some of this power struggle between who's the alpha on the team, the stuff that like Bill Simmons, would always like kind of rant about. And that's why I think the way that somebody like Jokic plays, for example, and I think even in the broadcast last night with OKC and San Antonio, there was some commentary about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander saying like he felt like he had let his teammates down last season in terms of preparing them for the playoffs because he had taken on so much of the offensive load during the course of the regular season. His point being like, we got to share the ball. We got to get everybody involved. We got to get everybody ready for those big moments. Not that Tyrese Maxey and Paul George are not ready for the big moments if they're not getting the ball, but the point being that like, I think this is a fragile situation to balance all these egos if Joel Embiid is not the best offensive player in the world. I think things get a little bit shaky if Joel Embiid is like the 10th best offensive player in the world. And then Paul George and Tyrese Maxey can be like, hey, I'm not that far away from the 10th best offensive player in the world. I'd like more shots. But when Joel's like the best one-on-one post-up player in the world, I think everybody just kind of falls in line and agrees like, yeah, we got to get the ball through the big fella. And so that's why I'm saying the way that he's looked right now is a little bit concerning to me, because I think that opens up some of these potential ego battles offensively that could, and this is obviously like a fairly fragile locker room situation right now. Mm-hmm. That's my concern for Philadelphia, is that it doesn't take a lot for there to be question marks about who should be getting more shots and different things like that. And the way that they play is so take-turny. It's not a lot of share the ball stuff, because the whole offense is just like throw it down into Joel and we'll figure it out. And Nick Nurse has not run creative offenses throughout his time. It's always been this stuff. It's always been isolation heavy, whether it was Pascal Siakam before in Toronto or now Joel. It's always been, there's not movement. And so I think that stagnant kind of offense works when you have great individual talent. But if that individual talent takes any step back, I do wonder if it's going to have other ramifications to the locker room.
Yeah, and just a couple other things with Nurse. So I was looking at some of the lineup stuff from the last game. Their number 2 lineup last night was Jeff Downton Jr., Jared McCain, Eric Gordon, Kelly Oubre, and Andre Drummond. Like no Paul George.
Yeah.
So obviously, like there are two of their top 3 non-Embiid lineups didn't have Paul George in it. Like that makes no sense. As great as McCain was obviously in both of those, but like why aren't you putting Paul George in there? That was a little bit weird. But that's probably a testament to Paul George, A, being on a minutes limit,
Yeah.
and B, just not playing well. So I don't know. But yeah, it's bad. It's all. We'll see if Max can play today. That's pretty surprising. And then also, are they just like shutting down Kyle Lowry? Like I feel like they may just be like shutting him down. He's been absolutely horrible the last few games, and they're not getting enough. We talked about this like 3 or 4
Yeah.
pods ago that this like filling out the roster worked out great. It's just like they're not getting enough out of the top guys right now. So I don't know. I think I
They're
said
not
all
getting
yours.
enough. They're not getting enough from everybody but McCain, really. I mean, like
Yeah. Yep.
Kyle Lowry and Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon got, kind of put out to pasture for a little bit early in the
Yep.
season so far as well. And like, I get that these guys are meant to be around Joel Embiid, and maybe if Joel Embiid is working correctly, maybe it all looks better. But so far, it hasn't. Yeah, and we'll see if things can improve and they can kind of get on the right track here. But I think the context of all of the timing of all this, right, is like we just saw the last game where Joel Embiid was listed doubtful for illness, and he ends up getting upgraded to play. And then these comments come out, and then the very next day, the very next game that they have, Tyrese Maxey is questionable and listed on the questionable. I assume Tyrese is going to try to play through this, because Tyrese is probably like going to be like, hey, I'm trying to play through everything. Probably the commentary was sparked by like, hey, illness, like we're really not going to play when you're good enough to go warm up. Like we're going to throw that out there, and Joel played through it. I think that stuff is not coincidence either. I think the timing of like the Joel doubtful, the Tyrese Q tag now, I think the timing is not coincidental. Like I think this all makes sense.
Yep. It made me think of with the way it shook out too. It also made me think of, I'll never forget, Dwayne Wade, flu-like symptoms on New Year's Day. Like, did he go out and rage too hard?
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, let's take him out. I don't know. Like, I think that's fair to say. But
there's also their schedule is another thing to talk about now, kind of coming up. So they're at Memphis tonight. They're getting Memphis on the second night of a back-to-back. That's like a good draw for relative to like when you're getting Memphis. Then they get Brooklyn at home, Clippers at home, Houston at home. Not the softest of schedules, but 3 home games. And then they get at Detroit, at Charlotte, 2 games consecutively at home against Orlando, at Chicago, Charlotte. So like this is a overall softer spot of the schedule where if they can turn the tide here a little bit, string together a 5 and 6 type performance, I think all of this goes away pretty quickly. Like I really think this is a situation that is being exacerbated by the feeling of we're 2-11, we're the worst team in the league. That feeling. I think if we get this back to 7-14, 7-13, it's like, okay, we're making headway, we're making progress. And I think this can be a rallying cry for Philadelphia. So I don't want to like bury things for Philadelphia right now. I do think the schedule can get better and things can improve, but it's been a disastrous, like with a capital D, start to the season.
Yeah, they're last in offense. They're last in offense, but there's some really bad teams in the league and they're last in offense. So yeah, we'll see. We're not burying them yet. As we've been talking about, it's not an insurmountable lead, but this is bad for them. All right. Maybe we won't talk about the Sixers next week. Maybe we'll talk about them being good. Who knows? But anything else you want to mention to get us out of here?
No, as always, want to appreciate you guys listening in, and thank you for listening in. If you're interested in checking out video versions of these podcasts, you can go over to our YouTube channel, Established Run NBA on YouTube, and check out video versions of these podcasts, as well as our daily injury shows that we post there as well. If you're interested in checking out any of our premium content, you can go to establishedrun.com/subscribe-MBA for more details on all of our premium product offerings on the prop side, on the DFS side. We're really proud of the work that we're putting out there on the premium side. So appreciate you guys. Scheduling note, we will have a podcast next week during Thanksgiving. We've been recording these on Thursdays. We record this today on Wednesday, November 20th, because of some scheduling issues for me. We will be recording Monday of Thanksgiving week. So we will have a podcast out that week. That will be the only podcast. We're on this once a week schedule, but we're not skipping Thanksgiving week just because we've been recording on Thursday. So you will hear from us again next week.
Yep, should be fun. A lot of NBA Cup action. One more Friday to talk through. That'll be exciting. So appreciate you guys. We'll catch you guys next time.